Let's begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we record today, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Hi, I'm Laurie from Truku Executive Search, and today I'm joined by Merrill Pereyra, CEO of Domino's Pizza Australia and New Zealand. Welcome, Merrill.
Hello. Thank you for having me out here.
What was your very first job, Merrill, and what did it teach you that you still use today?
I'll start with the background of my first job in Australia. So I migrated from India. I was 23 years old. And my first job was starting on the front counter of McDonald's in Melbourne on Burke Street West. And my background is I went to hotel school, which qualifies me to start working as a management trainee in a five-star hotel. And so when I migrated to Australia, I applied to all the hotels in Melbourne and as a management trainee. And they all came back to me and said I didn't have any Australian experience. So then I went back to the same hotels and I said, if I can't start in the middle, can I start as a concierge or a room boy or a kitchen hand or whatever? And they all came back to me and said, you're overqualified for that. So as a result of which, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And so I applied for a job at McDonald's and I started off by working on the front counter. Now, a lot of people had asked me at that time why are you doing this? You're qualified to be working in hotels. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to take this job. And in a couple of years, I'm going to get some experience and then I'm going to find a real job, which, of course, a couple of years led to 23 years with McDonald's. So the lesson I learned from that was basically just say yes. You've got an opportunity, say yes, stay present, and let things work out after that. So for me, that was the biggest learning. Even though a lot of people ridiculed me at that time for taking on this role, I just thought, you know what, I have nothing to lose. It's a job. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to see what it leads to.
Yeah, wow. Love that. And now you're the CEO of Australia New Zealand Domino's. So there you go.
I've been lucky.
Thank you for sharing. Looking back on your very impressive career, what's been a defining moment in your career that's shaped the type of leader you are today?
In 5 years with McDonald's, I had like 4 promotions. So I went from stores to then being like an area manager, managing a number of stores. And they were looking for somebody to set up the Middle East, being Saudi Arabia, which in those days, and even maybe today, but in those days was one of the toughest countries to live in because of the local laws and everything else. So for me, saying yes to that, and then, after having just settled in Australia and having a good career, even though I was going to be with the same company, but to then leave this comfort zone and then I had to move to the Philippines for a year and hire all my staff and get them trained. And then from there, we shipped them all to Saudi Arabia. So for me, that was a huge, huge challenge. I mean, going into a completely different country. In Saudi Arabia, because of the culture, you have to have 2 dining rooms. One is for families and one is for males. So, it's completely different from anywhere else in the world. In those days, McDonald's was the only restaurant company in the world where you had to set up a restaurant with 2 separate dining rooms. So one kitchen running 2 dining, and they couldn't cross over. So, just for me, being able to stretch myself and go out there and, start that brand. So you start from scratch. People don't know what McDonald's is. You're the last QSR chain to come into the Middle East. Today, McDonald's is the biggest chain. But to be part of that history and say, I set up the first company out there. And I think for me, that was a time when I realized that, do it. Just say yes, do it, and go out there and give it your best shot.
And often I feel like when we are so out of our comfort zones and probably very close to giving up, that's where and you learn the most and you grow the most, right? Personally and professionally.
Yeah, and I think also the other thing that really, I tell people this when I mentor people as a hobby, is that sometimes you get into a role and you may not have all the answers, but if you put your heart and soul into it, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You will figure it out.
Yeah, agree. What's something about people and leadership that's proven to be true no matter where you are in the world?
So, we used to have this quote in the past that says, treat people the way you want to be treated. And I don't believe in that. I believe treat people the way they want to be treated. For me, that's a big thing. And I've been in the space for 35 years and done 23 geographies. So right from the Middle East to Asia and different parts of Asia, understanding people and what drives them. So some people are driven by money. Some people are driven by, the career opportunity. Some people are driven by, just being part of a global brand. Trying to figure that out with your people will really help you get them motivated and get them driven. So for me, that's a big thing, just understanding the cultures. I mean, one of the rules I had when I was running the company in Malaysia was there's a couple of times, because it's an Islamic country, and there's a couple of times in the year when people fast. And so we'd go into a meeting and you'd have half the room that's fasting and the other half that's not fasting, and they would order coffees and all this stuff. And I just stopped that. I said, you've got to respect the culture. And so if you want to have your coffees and your waters or whatever you want to have it before we get into the meeting, because even though they didn't object to it, I think respecting that they were fasting, and the same thing in Saudi Arabia and other parts of the world. So I think understanding the culture, number one, and then respecting it is a big thing. So for me, that's the one that stands out the most.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. You recently shared a post about authenticity in leadership and dropping the armor. How do you balance being open and human while still leading high-performance teams?
So I think I wrote this. I've been writing a lot about this subject lately, and I thought I'll just make some notes because I want to quote exactly what I've been writing. So I've written this out here about vulnerability, right? So Bernie Brown is a legend, and so she quotes vulnerability as, vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. And I think that's really, really powerful. There's also something called calibrated vulnerability. And for that is sharing enough to build trust and clarity without creating instability. So, because when you share sometimes too much, people can feel really insecure around you. So I think, I like the word of calibrated vulnerability. And for me, dropping the armor is all about, doesn't mean you don't overshare and you by dropping the armor, you're losing your authority. It just means like removing the barriers that block trust and candor and connection. And if I had to just give you a simple line, it's like, people ask me questions and I'll say, I don't have the answers right now, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to you with the answers. And I'm not, sometimes people think as the leader of a company, you're supposed to have the answers for everything. But for me, that's what it is. And I wrote some things out here like, people don't just trust you, they trust the culture. And transparency at the top reduces politics and increases alignment. And that's a really important thing, because the higher you go, I think, politics can play a crucial role in, whether the company turns around or the company grows or whatever. So for me, I feel that, when you have an armored culture, it delays bad news. Vulnerable cultures, and when they surface it early, it allows faster and a cleaner course for correction. So I was writing those notes and I thought I should read it off from there.
Thank you.
And share it with you, because I think it's a big subject today.
Yeah.
And it's something that people need to, I think it's a skill set that you need to learn.
Yeah, agreed. People are your greatest asset. So if your people don't trust you as a leader,
Exactly.
you're not going to get the best out of them.
Yeah, exactly. Spot on.
You've spent so much of your impressive career helping businesses grow internationally, which later became the foundation for your book, Expand Your Brand, which I'm very excited to read. What's something people often misunderstand about growth and scaling successfully?
So there are a number of things, and I'm going to hit some of the key points on this one. Is number one, people think that a brand that's successful in another country is going to be successful in your country. And there's some of the biggest global brands that you have that have failed in countries. and it's not because the brand is not going to be cannot be expanded. It's that when you go and you do a deep dive into it, some of the brands haven't got the fundamentals right. I think the big thing is how do you take a global brand and you make it local. And a lot of people, I've seen a lot of companies fold in China, a lot of companies fold in India, and you wonder why they're so successful everywhere else, but they haven't succeeded in that country. And it just comes down to not understanding how you take a global brand and you make it local. That's the first thing. The second thing is when you start opening a new brand in a country, just setting the milestones. Setting the milestone and saying, I need to get to, if it's in the restaurant business, I need to open 20 stores or 50 stores before we make any money or whatever, and just basically know that that's my milestones. That's the time when I got to basically, I know that my brand is working.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when I've gone into setting up countries, and I've done that right from the South Pacific to the Middle East, it's basically just making sure that you understand what it's going to take to make you successful in the country that you are. And sometimes people, I remember having a conversation with a company where when I was in India saying, oh, we'd like to come to India and expand. And so how many restaurants do you think we could have in the first 10 years? And I said, oh, you get about maybe 250, 300 restaurants. And they were like, oh, no, we're looking at 5,000 restaurants. And this is where there's a disconnect, because people look at the population in that country and they say, oh, you've got 1.4 billion people and you should be having 10,000 restaurants. But it's not that,
It's not that simple, the equation.
Yeah, it's not that easy. So I think being able to be realistic about what the expectations are, understanding the culture, and then having a look at, how will this global brand work locally? I'll give you another example of McDonald's. So I set up the first company of McDonald's in Fiji. And Fiji's got 51% of the population are Indians. And we advertise on the menu cheeseburger. Now, in Australia, a cheeseburger is a cheeseburger, a slice of cheese, and a beef patty.
Yes.
But to a foreigner who's a vegetarian and it's against their religion to have beef, a cheeseburger, they were expecting a cheeseburger to be just a toasty, a cheese,
Yes.
a piece of bread and some cheese. And so when we were giving them this cheeseburger which had beef in it, they were like, and taking a bite, they're like, this is against our religion. How dare you do this to us? So making sure that you got to adapt, and so we would call it cheeseburger, but also, having it written out there in bold that it's a cheeseburger, but it's got beef in there. At the same time, when we opened the Middle East, we had hamburger in there, and in the Middle East, being an Islamic country, pork is against the religion.
Yes.
So when you say hamburger, people think, oh, the burger's going to have a piece of meat and ham, and they were like, how dare you sell ham in this country? But it's not ham, right? So we had to basically. So these are the things that you need to understand before you set up a brand and understand all that. And there are countries where, you have to be halal. So you can't have your product that's not halal. So the more you understand this, the more you're going to be successful with your brand launch.
That leads really well into my next question. A lot of the book focuses on expansion in business, but is there a lesson in there that you think applies just as much to personal growth and leadership?
I think, of course, there is. And I think it also comes down to your background and, your upbringing. So my background is I grew up in India. I lost my father when I was 2 years old. And so I grew up with a single mother, and I'm the youngest of four. I have three elder sisters. So, and, we were from a low-income background. And so my mother, worked to provide for the family, and I think those things instilled in me wanting to change the way my life was going to move forward. And I always believed that I had to stretch myself and really push myself to be the best in what I did, and as a result of which when I moved to Australia, I was always going to make sure that I always kept getting myself skilled. And so throughout my career, I've been fortunate to go to some of the leading Ivy Leagues in the world. I'm an alumni from Wharton. I did my management out there. I studied strategy in Harvard. I went to INSEAD in China and learned how to do business with the Chinese. And then Mecca sent me to Thunderbird University in Arizona, again, to do different parts of learning. So I've always kept that learning going. And I think it's I find it really interesting when I look at someone's CV and they graduated like 20 years ago, but they've done no learning. And I think having that learning ongoing, and for me, Ivy League was like the icing on the cake, and I wanted to do it. So I feel good I did it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's that it demonstrates that curiosity as well when lifelong learning. It's, shows curiosity, which is such an important skill when you're looking at bringing in, new talent into a business. What habits, routines, or philosophies help you stay grounded and perform at your best?
So I have a few. So I don't need an alarm to wake up, but I wake up at 4 a.m. every day. Sometimes it's 3:45, but it's never 4:15. It's always 3:45 or 4. So that's the first thing that's always happened. I believe in fitness, in both fitness for the body. So I go to the gym 6 days a week, and I also believe in spiritual fitness, where I believe that I'm on this earth and there's something bigger than me up there, and so I practice that daily. I do a lot of mindfulness. My first cup of coffee takes about an hour because and I'm not doing any work, so it's just that first cup of coffee is so important to me. But before I have that first cup of coffee, I drink 1 liter of water. Wow. So these are just the things that I've learned. I've studied with various people around the world. So those are my routines that I do first thing when I start. But to stay grounded, having just done a stint in India, when you go into the store, a grocery store, there's about 50 different types of chocolate. But growing up in India, there was only one type of chocolate called 5-star. And it was really, really small. And we would get that once a year, and we had to basically cut it into 4 pieces because we have 4 kids. And that one piece of chocolate I used to put in my mouth, and I would suck on it for like 2 hours, That was the only thing we saw. And so one of the things I've done, except I couldn't do it in Australia because you can't bring chocolates from overseas, but every country that I've lived in, if you open my fridge or you came into my study, there was a bar of that chocolate kept at a strategic position out there. So I would look at it, and that reminded me where I came from. So it was always, it got me grounded, because when things go well, your whole life changes, your lifestyle changes and everything else. But for me, having a look at that always made me reflect on just where I come from.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. What is the best piece of advice you have been given in your career?
One of them is, of course, say yes. The other one was focus on the current job. Very often when you work with a global brand, they've got amazing career paths. And I've only done global brands. So when you hire someone, the first thing you want to know is what happens in 2 years' time? What's the next job going to look like and everything else? And my thing to them is always, don't worry about the next job. Do the one you're doing right, and you will be okay. And that's what I've believed in, and that's what I've done. So for me, those are the things that really, those are the things that people have told me, and that's what I believed in.
Yeah, thank you. If your career had a soundtrack, what 3 songs would feature on it?
Oh, so A Million Dreams, by The Greatest Showman. I think that's top. So I have a playlist actually on my Spotify that has a list of these songs because I tend to go back to it quite often. Yeah. So A Million Dreams. The other one that I really like is Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson. It's about looking at yourself in the mirror.
Classic.
Very classic. And then there's another one by by The Journey. What is it? I've written it down. Let me give you the exact name. I took it off on my plate. So Don't Stop Believing by Journey.
Love
and of
that.
course, one of my favorites is also Imagine by John Lennon. So yeah, but I've got a whole playlist of them, and I go back to it quite often.
Love your music.
I love my music.
Thank you. Thank you. And finally, we can't let the CEO of Domino's leave without asking, what is your go-to pizza order?
So I'm really spoiled for pizza options because number one is we have a test kitchen next to my office, and on a and I love pizza. Even before I got into the pizza business, I love pizza. So being able to just have an assortment of different types of pizza has been a really good thing for me. Also, it's crazy. You know, in Domino's, we serve 2.5 million pizzas a month, which is 158 pizzas a minute
Wow.
in Australia. And my favorite pizza is usually, because I've worked in countries where there's no beef and bacon.
Yeah.
So it's the meat lovers.
Yeah.
With extra bacon, and I like the sweet and hot. So lots of pineapple, lots of chili flakes.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a good
mixer.
combo.
Very good combo.
That's
Very
a
good
good
combo.
combo. Merrill, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an insightful conversation exploring the experiences, lessons, and perspectives that have shaped your leadership across such a broad global career. Thank you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me out here, Laurie.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Look out for our next episode, where I'll be sitting down with another C-suite leader to explore the experiences and influences that shape who they are beyond the title.